Hey y'all, I'm Reese, and welcome to Making Meaning. Making Meaning is a podcast by the Cohere Collective that is here to guide you along your path to make meaning in a way that makes sense for you by sharing the ways other people have made meaning in their lives. This week, I am joined by my dad, Mike Brown. I typically refer to guests by their first names, but I'm just going to have to call him Dad because otherwise I will feel very strange, so... My dad is currently retired, but before his retirement, he was a finance executive at a mortgage company. And now my dad spends his time sailing and winning national championships doing so, tending to bonsai trees, scuba diving, petting our dog Sage, and having fun with my mom. In this episode, we cover a whole bunch of things from free will to luck to God and the afterlife to trying to live a successful life. But a few quick notes. In the very beginning of the episode, my dad mentions that he is grateful for cookies. And since I can remember, my dad has always said that the meaning of life is to get cookies. So that's a little throwback to that. Later in the episode, my dad and I discuss free will, and our tone takes on that of a debate. However, I just wanted to note that we aren't actually debating or disagreeing. My dad and I both just get very passionate and into these conversations. So just a note on that. There is also a Matrix reference later on, so if you haven't seen those movies, when my dad mentions Neo later in the episode, that is the movie that he is talking about. Highly recommend. And an audio note, there are a few moments when you can hear my neighbor's dogs barking. I tried my best to edit it out, but hopefully it isn't too distracting. With all of that covered, let's take a deep breath and get started. Hi, Dad. Yes.
Hi, Reese.
Don't be nervous. You're acting so nervous.
Tense?
Yes.
I am tense.
It is just a conversation between a father and his daughter.
Okay.
Cool.
Got it.
So, to kick us off, you know the drill as an avid listener, but what is one thing you are grateful for right now? And you can't say me.
Okay.
I had a feeling as soon as I saw your face.
I am grateful for cookies.
Fair enough. That is the meaning of life.
It is, as I've mentioned before.
Yeah, is to get cookies.
You know how you get, not right out of the oven, but a few minutes out of the oven?
Mm-hmm.
The edges are crispy.
And they're soft in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of cookie?
Well, I feel a little bit healthy when I eat oatmeal raisins with chocolate chips. But peanut butter are good. Any kind of cookie.
What about the anise biscotti like Grandma would make?
That's really good, too. I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you told me that you were nervous about this question, but there is no reason to be nervous. You've heard a couple other people do it. But what is your story?
Yeah, see, I thought I could figure this out. That's really hard.
But that's the thing. There's no pre-planning or
Yeah, I don't have really. So, I guess I'm the middle child of three.
Mm-hmm.
I have an older brother and a younger sister. I was always, I think I learned a lot from my family in my earlier childhood years, more about what not to do, what kinds of things I didn't want in my life or part of my life, as opposed to how to do things well.
Sure.
I recall, being very independent, internal locus of control, looking for, being, kind of my own person. I was not very good at school. I figured out, as you know, I figured out in school how to get by. I kind of managed to figure out what the standard or the expectation was from my mom, and clearly I knew what the expectation was at school, which was, they said you don't get a C or better, you're not getting out of here.
Right.
So I figured that out. One thing I didn't figure out that was kind of a disappointment, it came to me later.
A disappointment in yourself?
Yeah, well, it was disappointing that I didn't recognize this earlier on. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even recognize it until I had kids and I was telling my kids, I just couldn't stand school. I didn't like being there. I didn't want to be there. The social pressures were probably more of a big deal than the work or the academic, mm-hmm. but I didn't like either. I didn't want to, and all I wanted to do was get out. What I realized about school, or anything, if you're going to do something, whether you like it or not, if you're going to be there for several hours a day, set your mind, get your perspective to get the most out of it.
Yeah.
You can't be Superman, you can't be top notch every minute of every day. You can't be on top of things all the time, but at least have a perspective and a mentality of getting something out of it while you're there spending the time. Yeah,
especially if you're going to be there anyways, you might, instead of wasting it, you might as well try and get something from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So earlier you said internal locus of control, that was something. Tell me more about that. Was that something that you learned as you were older that you were doing when you were younger? Is that something you intentionally developed as a young person? And what does that mean to you?
I'm not sure if that's DNA or if I developed that, but I definitely did not realize what that meant or anything about it until later. Even in my college years, I kind of learned what an internal locus of control meant versus an external.
And how would you define that real quick?
So I would define that most everything that comes into my life or went out of my life, if there was an ability to control it, it was up to me to control it. To assume or to put the control in the hands of others was unacceptable for me. It wasn't something that I was just programmed to do.
And do you think that came from a place of anxiety and stress that you wanted to be in control, or it came from a place of like honor and morality that it's the right thing to do to take control?
I don't think it was either of those. I think it was a recognition that if anything was going to happen, for better or worse,
you would have to be the one to do it.
I wanted to be in control, and I believed I was going to have to drive to that conclusion. I couldn't wait for something to happen to me. And if I made a decision or went a direction and that was not the right one, in my opinion, I would have been better off. I was better off by acknowledging that I made a mistake, learning from my mistake and moving on from that versus, and or also not learning that things were out of my control. I think you have a stronger sense of being able to direct your life if you believe you're in control. Mm-hmm. And I do, there are tons of examples where I believed I was controlled by others, controlled by a system, controlled by an environment, controlled by my appearance, all those things that I could have grasped onto, that I would have considered external locus of control. I didn't see any benefit to acknowledging that because it was out of my control.
Huh. Okay. And so, like you said, when you were younger, it's not like this was something you were cognitively aware of at that moment. This is more something you've developed looking back and reflecting.
Exactly.
Okay. So, at what point did you start looking back and reflecting on those things, and why did that happen? Why did you start thinking about
Well, that's interesting.
your younger life?
So later, I'm in high school. I took a psychology class, and I learned a little bit about this stuff. I started taking business classes in college, organizational behavior, etc., and I'm learning more and more about personality types and these kinds of concepts. So before I learned that, though, I don't. This might be relevant. That it's kind of important that through high school, like I said, I was not a stellar student, and I spent all this time working and trying to figure out how to get out of it, but I was still sitting there at a desk.
So when you say how to get out of it, you don't mean get out of like this kind of teenage angst thing where it's like, I just want to get out of this town. You mean like getting out of the day-to-day work.
Yeah, getting out of the classroom and going out and doing something in the world that was fun. As opposed to at the time, seemingly meaningless, but as I matured, I know that.
You would define that as just trying to do something fun, not something that felt meaningful? You really do think that was your drive, was for it to be just fun?
No, there's definitely, I think meaningfulness comes into that. I mean,
Sure.
One example, I remember, I think I was probably about 12, and we lived in an apartment complex, and there was a swimming pool there, and there were a bunch of the neighborhood kids in the swimming pool. And we're all doing our thing. It was probably a Saturday, midday-ish. Everybody's playing, splashing, having fun. And this strange-looking dude walks up to the end of the pool, and he yells and gets everybody's attention, and he says, how many of you, or which of you would like a job? And in an instant, my mind said, job equals money. Money equals freedom. I'm in. And I swam as fast as I could to the end of the pool. I think Michael Phelps would have been proud. Jumped out of the pool and ran right up to within inches of the guy because I wanted to be the first one in line.
Yeah.
I was going to be first, and nobody's going to be able to get between me and him.
If there's one job, it's mine.
If there's a job, I'm going to be first, and I'm going to have the opportunity to say yay or nay, right? It was interesting, right? So I'm standing there, his bad breath notwithstanding. I look around, and I'm the only one standing there. No one else cared.
You said y'all were 12? Or you were 12 at the time?
I was 12, and there were kids anywhere from 10 to 15 in the pool.
Sure.
Right? Roughly, plus or minus. And I look back, and they're all looking at me like I'm some kind of a nut.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at them like they're all some kind of a nut. And I couldn't figure that out. So needless to say, I got the job.
Right. But so I guess that kind of speaks to the root of my question, though, because you said that you're, not to put words in your mouth, but that you weren't a very motivated student. You were always trying to figure out a way to get out. And it sounds very much not like, it wasn't that you didn't want to do work.
Exactly.
Right?
This is why I was telling you the
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
Is it was hard to explain what I was trying to mean. But I was willing to work if
it was at something that felt valuable, meaningful, like it was actually going to be conducive to growing your life.
Sure.
Not like so many people say, like, oh, I'm not going to use calculus in the real world. Like, why am I spinning my wheels here when I could be down at the pool making money to,
Sure.
I don't know.
So no, the actual job was a newspaper route, and youngins like you may not know what a newspaper is, but in the old days, we used to get information delivered to our doorstep every morning in paper form, and so that was the job. It was for the apartment complex next door to ours, which was about a half mile walk across a vacant field at the time. It was a lot. I thought it was a lot of work. I was not what you would call the largest kid in the neighborhood. I wasn't a big kid.
Really?
Exactly. I remember having to we used to carry our newspapers in a big bag. I had to tie it in a knot just so it wouldn't drag the ground. And I'm carrying these two big, ginormous bags of papers across. On a side note, the kind of the worst part is you have to heave these papers up. The apartment complex had 3 stories, and I could go up the stairs and make my route last, 3 hours, or I could heave them up and throw them up there, which was a lot of work, but a lot less time, and make the route last about an hour. It's 2/3 less time going up and down stairs, right? The drawback was every once in a while a paper would hit the rail and start coming back at me. I didn't quite get it over, and I knew that was disaster, so I'd always try to catch it. I'd fail. It either hit me or hit the ground and bust wide open, and I'd have to put it back together and try to make it look nice and put it on their doorstep.
So there's some other parable in there.
Right. There you go. Anyway, I don't know why that popped into my head, but it did.
Yeah.
So one day I'm coming back from the newspaper route. I get bit by a spider. And sure enough, excuse me, all this weird stuff happens, and I have to concoct this weird story. I blame it on this kid in the neighborhood named Peter, because I became Spider-Man.
What as soon as you said spider, I was like, this is turning into a Spider-Man joke.
Okay, no Spider-Man joke. I'm not Spider-Man. I'm really Batman.
Right. Okay.
Anyway,
so
go ahead.
That kind of got at my question of, like, because you've never been one to shy, speaking as your daughter, who's known you for 23 years of my life, in the time that I've known you, but also in the stories that you tell about yourself, you're very self-deprecating in not wanting to be, you're very self-deprecating in describing yourself as not a good student, wanting to, find the easy way out. But then you're also someone who sees opportunities in places that other people don't. And it's not that the work is what you shy away from. I almost see it as like inefficiency.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
That is what's frustrating for you. And it's like, if school is a waste of time and I'm just required to be here, I am going to find the way to get it done the most efficiently. That way I can spend my time doing something that is productive, whatever productivity or whatever, to get to whatever success looks like for you, right?
Right. Unfortunately, I wasn't necessarily efficient at school. If I was only going to make C's and only do the bare minimum that was necessary, then that left a lot of idle time and trouble. I was good at getting in trouble.
Idle hands,
exactly. But you are correct that I am. I have a personal distaste for waste and inefficiency in general. Not just any inefficiency, but when people aren't making an effort to be efficient or to do things.
Well, because there are certain times that doing something not the most efficient way is still worthwhile, right? That there's something else you're getting out of it, like stopping and smelling the roses, or
reading a book for enjoyment is absolutely inefficient in certain terms, in certain ways, but it's a joy that life gives us that you don't want to miss, and that's just one example. There are a lot of them. Right.
Well, and I know you always told me, like, if I'm gonna watch a trash TV show or read a trash book, you would rather me read a trash book, right? Like some teeny bopper romance novel, as opposed to watching Fairly Odd Parents.
I would, because that's my perspective. I would, because I have a belief that reading even something, trash, is going to provide some benefits in that you become a better reader. You learn to read better.
Well,
you learn to comprehend. There's a lot of benefits that come from that. It's less engaging.
Yeah, especially
me. I think
depending
it's less
on
engaging.
the TV show.
It's a lot more of a one-way than a two-way activity.
Sure.
But so the evil irony of the world is when I finally get out of high school, I finally graduate. My mother's thrilled because that was an accomplishment. I'm jumping up and down, yoo-hoo, great, but it didn't take long, like days or weeks. I kind of wake up and I'm thinking, I'm saying to myself, now what? Now what? What do we do from here? And I concluded pretty quickly that I had one of two options. One of those would be to pursue and become actively engaged in a career, or go to college. So more
Which
school
theoretically should put you on the path towards being actively engaged in a career. But isn't it interesting that those two paths, it's almost like a straight shot towards something or a little side tangent towards the same thing, right? And neither of those options that crossed your mind were, how do I become actively engaged in life?
that never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
No.
So,
That was definitely it's time to be responsible or not. And
in college was the not responsible thing? Comparatively in your brain?
yes.
Why?
Isn't that interesting?
That is.
So a big part of it though was fear. I was afraid of the responsibility. I was afraid of the unknown. I was afraid of what was out there.
Yeah. Well, college is way more similar to high school than a job is.
So college allowed me the ability to keep living at home.
Right.
My mother was okay if I was going to college. Like I said, I started with newspaper routes, but I'd always been working. I worked, and not because I had to, but because I wanted to work
Right.
and have the independence and the freedom that gives you. Through high school and college. So I was working jobs, and they weren't glamorous or odd jobs. They were crap jobs, but I was working, doing this. But the college route allowed me to to kind of stick with the status quo. I could keep working the part-time jobs. I could be, I could be very. I didn't have to really find something that was quote unquote a career or a profession or something that was going to pay the rent. I just had to pay, the college tuition. So I sauntered down to the community college that was not far from our home, and they said, "Sure, we'd love to have you, but we need you to take this test before you could come in." I'm like, "Okay, I could take a test. I'm good at that." And I take the test, and unfortunately, they informed me that there was a lot of material I was supposed to learn in high school that I hadn't yet demonstrated proficiency for. And so my first couple of years in college, and this is really the kick in the pants for me, the first couple of years in college, I was taking the classes repeating basically the classes that I didn't pay attention in high school.
So talk about frustration with the lack of efficiency and time, right?
With yourself, right.
Yeah.
With an internal locus of control, I had no one I could blame besides myself on that.
I mean,
I can't say, I didn't have the right environment, I didn't have this, I didn't have that. It was, I knew better.
So that's interesting because, sure, you're naturally a smart person. Even when you're in high school, you knew better. Like, grandma was also a smart woman, and I think raised y'all with drive and, good morals. But I do think that it almost gets into the question of, at what point in your life are you responsible for the way you live your life versus the way you've been raised or the way you've been told to live your life? Because even though grandma was a great mom, there is the question of, well, she knew you were slacking off and you could do better. Like, you and mom never would have let me or my brother get away with that, right? So it's like, yes, there's no one you can blame but yourself to a certain extent, because the true consequence does fall on you.
Sure.
However, then at what point do you think the consequence, whether that be blame or praise, of any student or any child's successes or failures then fall on them? If you think that that is 100% your fault.
Well, no, I think so. That's a fair question, because now...
Because it's got to be a mix, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So the question you said, when does one become responsible for their own decisions? And I think it's an evolution. I think at a few years old, one becomes responsible for some minor decisions in their life. Do I go take this toy away from that kid over there because I want it? Or do I go negotiate with that kid over there? Or do I find another toy to satisfy me until that kid puts it down?
But even
so
if
there's growth and decision making.
Yes.
When I was screwing off in high school, I knew better.
Sure. So it was some point before then that you think you should have learned that. But even, like, let's take the example of the baby stealing the toy. What if that baby was put up for adoption, put in a home, and subconsciously learned that for getting any... So let's say it's a toddler, not like a baby, right? For getting enough food, for getting the toys you want, you have to be aggressive, you have to take it, you have to do those things. No one would blame that baby for...
Sure, so
you know
we
I mean?
all learn...
And that wouldn't be that baby's
So there's
fault.
two sides to this. We learn, back to being efficient, we learn how to be effective
Right.
at
Based
accomplishing our goals
your
pretty early in
environment.
life. And we practice by manipulating our parents, by trying this, by trying that. And if our environment... If we're raised in an environment where certain behaviors are effective at accomplishing our goals and reinforced that way, of course we're going to learn poor behavior.
And so
but the bottom line
can
is,
you blame
I
that
don't
on
know
that?
when. I don't know when it happens, but at some point, if we're honest with ourselves, we know.
Yeah. So I agree with you that there is a certain point where you can no longer blame the parents, right? That, like, that's the easy thing to, like, boil this all down to, even though, of course, there's way more variables and complexities within that, right? But for the sake of conversation, we'll say you can no longer blame the parents. But it's really, really hard, even for me now. So I'm 23. And there are even things that, like, people in my age demographic will do or will say, and I am like, did no one teach you better than to do that? At what point are you responsible for your own education, even if your family came from that? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
And I
you
disagree.
think for you, at some point, it happened during or before high school, where you were, like, not smart enough, but cognizant enough of the way life worked to take up the ownership of your internal locus of control.
Yeah. It was even before high school, it was like I said, I don't know if it was environment or DNA or what, but it was innate in me. It was part of me one way or another. It was part of me from a very early age, and it evolved and it grew and expanded in breadth at how I comprehended it at first.
And probably depth.
At
too,
first,
breadth and depth.
I learned, early I learned how to be a kind of a people pleaser. I was a young people pleaser. And I've read, like, stories about, some people are guilt throwers and some people are guilt catchers. And I'm a guilt catcher. If there's guilt to be had, I'll take the guilt for something. And that's not 100% healthy, but I do think in some ways it helps you learn to really to control what you can control. It's not healthy in a sense that, if you're accepting guilt and responsibility for things that are truly, out of your purview, out of your ability to control, then you're really just beating yourself up.
Right.
And so you really have to start delineating what is control. What does it mean, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think I've told you that every success or every accomplishment, like you said, when do you start giving credit or taking credit for your accomplishments versus giving it to other people? And
Right.
I think everything that's a success or an accomplishment has, I guess, 4 components to it, really.
4?
It used to be 3, right? I've changed my mindset a little bit. I've added
I don't
a 4.
remember
The 3 has always been,
Okay,
if you look
pause,
at any
real quick
success story.
before. Is this a theory that you have developed?
Well, I don't know if I developed it, but this is thoughts
your
I've had.
version of it. Okay,
These are
continue.
thoughts
I don't
I've
know
had.
if I've heard this before.
Oh,
If I have, I don't remember it.
I know I've shared it with your brother umpteen times. I think every success story, when we look at the Elon Musk, the Bill Gates, the Warren Buffetts, the
Whoever.
Reese
Michelle
Browns,
Obamas.
every success story includes a component of luck, a component of hard work, a component of let's say DNA or gifts or talent, whatever you want to call
they built
that.
it where
Certain abilities,
yeah.
if the successful basketball player is 7 foot tall, that
that
that's
has some
the
overlap
DNA.
with luck too, right?
Yeah, so that's DNA. Some people could argue that the DNA you're born with is luck.
Yeah.
And I've added a fourth to that, I think, in that it also includes a component of help from a lot of other people, both positive and negative. Some people influence us in a way that they teach us what doesn't work, and other people influence us by encouraging us and teaching us what does work and being there for us and being supportive. And so I think to take 100% of the credit for being successful, any person that does that, I think, is short-sighted in not being appreciative and grateful for the people that's helped them.
Right.
And they're not being honest with themselves if they don't truly believe that some form of luck or cosmic
higher power or
goodness, some cosmic goodness or God or whatever isn't a part of it.
Yeah.
They can take the credit for the hard work, and that they should. I think every individual should hold themselves accountable, responsible, and give themselves credit for their efforts and their hard work. But they should also recognize these other components.
So this is really interesting. This has prompted two thoughts in my brain. One, so maybe this question of when is responsibility thrust upon someone is not really about responsibility. It's more about awareness of the role you play in your own life. Because if you're looking at these four components, right, and you've laid them out as luck, we'll say cosmology, cosmic goodness, whatever your belief system is.
No, wait. Luck and cosmic goodness are the same thing.
Oh, okay.
The cosmic
luck
goodness
from whatever, hard work,
intelligence or DNA or gifts or talents, all those things is the third.
And then
Others.
Help from other people. So if those four are always present, which I think there's some overlap, because I think DNA, talents, gifts, cosmic goodness, luck are all very interrelated, but if those four things are present, that means that the hard work of the individual plus external impact is always, both of them are always part of punishment and reward. So you can always, at least in part, and I guess to have a perfect story of how this would actually play out or roll out, if this was a theory we wanted to live our lives based on, you would need to know what percentage based on every accomplishment was hard work versus external help versus the other two items. But even that baby stealing the toy, to go back to that example, part of that would be the hard work that it took for them to go over there and take the toy or whatever. And part of that would also be the influence of others from growing up in a group home, right?
I agree with that, yes.
There is no one moment where it is solely your responsibility. It is simply now within your awareness of how external factors are impacting you. Does my question or my thought make sense?
I followed you. I'm not.
So,
but let me go back to something you said a few minutes ago, though. Let me make sure. So when you were talking about the percentages, how much does each of these components contribute to an accomplishment or something?
Right. In action.
And I think this goes back to where we were talking earlier, internal versus external locus of control.
Mm-hmm.
I think an internal locus of control person is going to heavily weight the hard work / effort component.
Sure.
Over the the gifts,
the chance,
the cosmic goodness, the gifts from cosmic goodness that you have, the height to play basketball, or the speed to play another sport or whatever.
Yeah.
External locus of control person is going to look at their life and say, I didn't do this. It's a glass half empty. In my opinion, I think there's benefits to both of these, but the way I view it, it's more, for me, if I were to be externally locus of control, I would view it as a glass half empty perspective for my life, because I would be saying, everything is controlled by outside forces. So it's more about the DNA. It's more about the other people that were or were not in my life.
I don't have all that much control over my life path.
You say that again.
Based on that mindset,
right.
You would
Exactly.
be thinking, I actually don't have all that much control, so what does it really matter what I do?
That's my problem with a fully effectualized external locus of control. The problem I have with that is, why bother?
That's the conclusion you seem to find with that.
Towards a human version of determinism,
Okay. Yes. However, because that's also kind of where I was thinking, because it almost starts to get into questions of free will. So I guess to go back to try and clarify what I was saying, when I asked you the earlier question of at what point is it someone's responsibility to take ownership of their life versus their parents, their upbringing, whatever.
Okay.
If there is always external factors at play for any action, any accomplishment, any failure, then there really isn't a moment where the person should be required to take full responsibility. There is simply a moment where the person should be aware of the amount of control they now have. It's not a you take ownership, it's a shift in awareness.
Yes, I think I understand what you're saying, the moment, this is turning it around a little bit, but the moment one becomes responsible is the moment they become aware. I think it's very difficult to become a 25-year-old who wasn't substantially abused or hidden back away from society. If you're a part of society and you're 25 years old, you've seen enough television, you've read enough books, you've been in enough school and social environments.
Unless you were significantly stunted in some way.
At 25, I don't believe personally that there's any excuse beyond one's own choices. But I do think we're human and people make mistakes. And so then when we set expectations, we also, in my opinion, ought to consider how we would address something that falls outside the boundary.
Yeah.
I do believe, and you and I have had this conversation before, I believe a person's intent, what's in their heart when they say and do something, is a huge factor.
Yeah.
In the rightfulness, wrongfulness nature of it. And I do think we hurt people unintentionally a lot.
Sure.
And I do think we should be obligated to learn and try not to hurt people.
Yeah.
But it happens.
Well,
so we need to be patient and forgiving too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is a thing, the intent versus impact, right? We talk about that a lot. And that's something that I've been thinking about recently, because I agree with you. Someone's intent could be perfectly positive, right? And yet still end up hurting someone. And so the way I kind of view it is that instead of, at least the way I've changed to viewing, the way I've changed my view of impact versus intent is that instead of it being one circumstance, it's actually two different isolated incidents. Or not isolated because they are related, but it's two different things, right? There is what happens when something is said, something is done, and how that is received. And those are two different things. And I think someone can do something that was fully intended to be positive and it still be received negatively. And
cause hurt.
And cause hurt. And in that situation, I do still think that repair needs to be made. I still think that it is based on this secondary instance. It's like you have to deal with the impact regardless of what it is, but it should change your opinion of the person who hurt you.
And
right?
Are you saying there's an obligation on the part of the giver and the receiver in this case?
Yes. I think on
agree.
both.
I agree with that.
So that's almost what I mean when I say there's these two different instances where it's not just like, no one's a mind reader. You can't hurt someone's feelings and be like, oh my gosh, I hurt their feelings, I need to apologize.
Certainly, right. And an apology isn't, well, I didn't mean to, so it doesn't matter.
No, yeah.
I agree with you. And if somebody's intent, if their heart was in a place where they weren't intending to cause hurt and they did, the question I would have is, why wouldn't you want to apologize or repair?
So
why wouldn't you want to if your intent was...
Here are the two pieces that I think exist here. And I was thinking about this on Tuesday, actually, after my therapy session. I think there is repair and understanding. When hurt has happened, when hurt has occurred, repair always needs to be made. It is on, at least in my opinion, it is the responsibility of the hurt party to bring that up, to own their feelings and say, this is how I feel. Our relationship means enough to me to own that I'm feeling hurt and I need XYZ. I need an apology. I need something. Whatever. And then the party who did the hurting will say, like you said, if the intent was good, I'm so sorry. I never want to hurt you. Can you forgive me?
Well, that's even just, I'm so glad you brought it to my attention.
I'm so glad you brought it to my attention.
My intent was, the meaning was different.
Secondary.
Yeah. Okay.
I think repair has to happen first.
I don't know what you mean by that. Repair.
The apology. The making right.
Okay.
When hurt happens, you're tearing the paper, right? Because it's like the hurt has happened. So you need to put some tape on it first to put the paper back together. Then once the tape has been put on the paper, then the two parties are now working together again. They're no longer at opposition. They're now back on the same team. They're back able to be collaborative because the tear has been, the most pressing concern has been taken care of. So now we can look back and say, okay, we know we're good. We know we care about each other and we care about our relationship more than being right. And we care about not hurting each other's feelings. That's important to us. So we figured that out. We've done the repair. We've taped back up the paper. That's instance one. Second instance is what went wrong. Clearly there was a misunderstanding, but now we're on the same team and we can be investigators together and figure out, why is something that you didn't intend to hurt my feelings hurting my feelings? And so that's when the person who did the hurting can say, that is not at all what I intended. Like, I am sorry that it did that, but I really meant X, Y, and Z. And party two can say, I can see where that came from. When you said that, I heard this. Moving forward, so this doesn't happen again, we should do B instead. I think, but if the two pieces of paper are still ripped, if you go back and start saying, well, that's not what I meant, it just sounds like you're fighting more because you haven't taken care of the rip. You're not back on the same team yet.
Okay. I see that.
So I think it's both parties' responsibility, and I think that there is a very clear order in how you have to take care of it.
Okay, that's where so let's explore. It's both parties' responsibility and or obligation, right? There's a sender of communication and a receiver of the communication.
Yes. I would say if you want to keep the relationship, there's an obligation on both parties, yes.
Right. So the question, and I'm just thinking out loud trying to explore this, is in some cases, why is it always the sender obligated to do the apology? So maybe the receiver had something happen in their life recently, and the comment, the communication from the sender was really a trigger. So the receiver received this in a different way, I mean, I can see a situation where somebody would say something that might hurt my feelings, but then I would step back. If I step back and I realize, or after we talk and realize what their intent was, I could apologize to them.
Yeah.
For
misunderstanding.
Right.
So I think it's nuanced, and I think it's complicated.
I thought, but I agree it is nuanced.
Yeah.
I thought you were trying to tell me that it's the center of the communication's responsibility to do the apology.
I see what you're saying. I think usually, yes. However, I think that hurt can go both ways. Whoever is doing the hurting, I do think is obligated to apologize, yes. However, I think when arguments happen, typically hurting goes both ways. Because I know for me, I've been on the side of something where I am like, what you said, I said something that, an overused word, triggered you, and that hurt your feelings. I'm sorry, that was not my intent. Now I've made a mental note of it to not talk about that or say something about that, whatever. However, when you jumped to the conclusion that I was abandoning you the same way whatever childhood trauma did, that really hurts me that you would even think that of me. So it's like that hurting goes both ways in that misunderstanding. And then that is when the other person could say, you're right, I'm sorry, I reverted back to my childhood trauma, I reverted back to my survival skills and not my elevated sense of emotional intelligence. Thank you for apologizing for the hurt, and I'm sorry that I hurt you with that expectation. Now the tape has been figured out. What can we do moving forward to prevent it from happening again?
Okay.
So I think, yes, the hurter does have to apologize, but hurt can go both ways. Are you on board with that?
I'm good with most of that, yeah.
Okay, sick.
Yeah, I'm good with most of that. Yeah. I do think there are situations where the hurted, the one who is hurt, if they reflect and are honest with themselves, would realize that they can make the apology. But the bottom line is, we think of apologies as something that's due or owed or obligatory, and I think we should use our apologies in a caring way. Whether I misunderstood what you said and I was hurt by it, it doesn't damage me to apologize.
No.
The apology is to say, look, I'm trying to empathize. I may or may not get it, but I'm doing my best to empathize. I think I understand where you're coming from, and I'm sorry that you feel bad.
To me, the apology is all about showing the other person that you care more about them than about your own ego. That's what the apology is.
And so it's great for both people to apologize.
Yeah.
The world we're in seems to interpret an apology as
admittance of guilt.
Admission of guilt, yeah.
And that is not what that is.
And so I think but the first part of it is being hurt a lot. If we go through our daily lives with very high expectations and expectations of others, and with our what's a good word, our mentality that we are all self-important and self-righteous and we have all these rights to being human, then almost anything and everything we can find fault in stuff that people do.
Sure.
But if we go through our day and we assume that people's intentions are good generally, and that people aren't intentionally trying to hurt, then I think it's easier. We could still have high expectations of others and have these conversations, but we don't have to have them coming from a place of anger. It could come from a place of curiosity and care.
A place of curiosity, I think, is a great way to say that. However, and I agree with the latter half of what you just said, but I think the first two things, at least the way I heard them, was it sounded like you framed them as opposites, and I don't think those are opposites, because the way I heard it was that you said, if we're walking around as though we're like entitled to all of this stuff and we have all of these baseline rights, like blah, 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 or we can walk around assuming people have good intentions. I think we can have both of those. I think we can say, this is baseline what I deserve. This is baseline what I will not put up with. But I can still always expect good intentions. I am still going to always give everyone the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. I think you can have both of those things.
Right. And sometimes even if you're wrong, but I remember...
I'd rather be wrong
assuming
the best of someone than the opposite.
Yeah, I remember being called blissfully ignorant, and somebody told me, you know what, you just got dissed. And I'm like, well, I feel better by not knowing it than knowing it. Now, I would rather know the truth about the world at the end of the day. But, it's okay to let some things go.
Yeah.
It's okay to let some things go.
Not everything has to be...
I was reading a story the other day about a scuba diver who when you go scuba diving, there's a boat with, say, 15 people on one boat. And you're living on this boat for a week with 14 other scuba divers. And one scuba diver wanted to take pictures, and he wanted to go his own way. He didn't want to follow the rules of the boat that incorporated certain levels of safety. He felt...
so he didn't have a buddy?
He felt he didn't need that. He felt and they assigned him one.
That is just dumb.
They assigned him a buddy. So the buddy system was created as a best practice.
Okay.
To provide redundancy under the water, so that if somebody has an equipment problem or an air problem,
it's a fail-safe.
They can share with each other. It's also two brains are better than one.
Right.
When you're task loaded, when you're underwater.
Right.
There are exceptions. There are times when solo diving is acceptable, but
for the case of this story, buddy would be the right system to use.
So that was self entitlement number one, I guess.
Right.
Was I don't have to have a buddy if I don't want to. I'm trained. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then number two was this person would stay down a lot longer. When you're down as a group or with a buddy, as soon as the first person of the group runs low on air, everyone comes up together.
Yeah.
Right? And this person happened to be able to make his air last longer. And so, the whole team would come up and sit
he's making everyone wait.
Sit in the boat, and everybody's waiting on the guy.
So it's not just dangerous for him, but it's taking advantage of everyone's time.
Right. And his comments were, I paid my money for the trip. I should be able to get my dives out of it. And on the one hand is yes. On the other hand is, let's do a metaphor. Just because you buy a car doesn't mean you get to run the whole road.
Yeah.
If you're in a group setting, if we are in a social situation, we have to be social beings. We have to behave.
Yeah. Pro-social behavior. That's literally what it is. And so that, to tie this back to the whole intent, impact, apology, apologizing is pro-social.
There you go.
It does not matter in pro-social behavior is ego last. It is putting yourself in other people's shoes. It's Golden Rule 101. That's pro-social behavior.
Sure, why not, right?
Yeah.
It's common courtesy. Golden Rule, yeah.
Yeah.
Common courtesy right there. So,
yeah.
Anyway, so...
Yeah. Okay. There's something else I want to go back to.
Okay.
We were talking about the 4 elements of achievement or failure in the things that are present.
Whatever, right?
We were talking about how we started talking about how that also gets into questions of determinism and or free will, which are deeply linked. And this is something I was thinking about a couple weeks ago because of St. Paddy's Day. And it started me thinking about something that I studied in high school for a paper about luck. And there's a whole section of philosophy dedicated to luck and how that is related to free will. So, when you say that one of the elements for success or failure is luck, philosophers that are much smarter than me have not yet been able to figure out a way to save luck, the element of luck or chance in life, without sacrificing free will. Because if luck exists, if something is up to chance, for instance, like your DNA, like the family you're born into, like the country that you're born into, we have no control over those things. We only have reactions to it. So if anything has any sort of element of luck, can we take credit for any of it?
I think so. And when I would use the word luck, so I think it comes down to how do we define that word. And I define the term to mean there's a component of randomness in everything. And some would argue, so luck could be at a particular company is did you happen to land with a boss that is more of your benefactor, or did you happen to land with a boss that has tremendous insecurities about you? And in either case, you're going to do your best job, but the personality, the environment, the history, the DNA of your boss can make or break your success.
Yes. So that is a piece of randomness. So, explain to me, which I'm like, I don't agree with this. I'm looking for a good answer, so I want you to give me a good answer. But this is something I've been contemplating. Why in that situation is worker and boss not just two sets of DNA, life experience, family of origin, and I don't know, belief system, worldview, positionality,
right.
whatever.
We're all individuals,
all of those things,
right?
Just interacting with each other. When we make a choice, is it not from the amalgamation of all those things? And if our choices really do come back to the amalgamation of all of those things that we didn't have control over, are we actually making choices of our own free will? Or is that just random? I don't know. I don't know how I could say
I'm not
that
sure I
that's
understand the question exactly. Is it just random? I guess what I'm trying to say is that I believe there are things that impact me in the world, mm-hmm. and that impact my successes and failures that are truly out of my control, in a sense that I either don't have the skill, the knowledge, the background. I'm missing something, whether it's authority or whatever, to be able to control it.
Exactly.
Okay. So, but I don't know that having some components of the world out of our control is an argument in favor of wholehearted determinism. I'm not seeing that.
Fair. So I guess the further argument that I have trouble with, because obviously I am pro free will. I would like to think that I have control over my life and the choices I make, so I'm trying to figure out a way to retain my free will. If I agree, just because every single action we take, we don't have 100% control over, doesn't mean that we don't have any free will. However, if any action we take, any action, is a combination of DNA, life experience, family of origin, positionality, worldview. All four of those things, and anything else that makes up your personality, your brain chemistry, everything that behavioral psychologists know about what makes us a personality, what makes us an individual, all of those things are out of our control. So if all of the things that impact the decisions we make are out of our control, how can what's that linking gap? Where is free will added into that equation?
Sure. Okay, I think I understand. I don't think you're including everything that impacts a choice or a decision.
Okay. So what part of a choice or a decision adds back in free will?
Our response to what happens to us.
But isn't our response based on DNA, experience?
I don't know. I mean, we could talk to Neo and say, did he have the choice to fight? He chose to fight. He said, why do you fight? I choose to.
I choose to. But that's the thing. The Matrix is based on Cartesian dualism, and this is...
But the big head in the sky says, you don't have a choice.
Right.
You're choosing to fight, and you will always choose to fight.
You will always.
Right.
There's not a world in which he doesn't. So why do we still, as the audience, root for Neo, even though we know he's always going to choose?
Because innately, I think this goes back to internal versus external locus of control. There is a piece of all of us, I believe, that has some level of internal locus control. If
No,
not,
yeah,
we
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
roll out of bed in the morning, right? And the piece, that component, that innate feeling or that sense of wanting, whether we believe it wholeheartedly or not, I think we just, because as we grow, as we interact in the world, we observe. I'm changing my answer a little bit.
That's okay.
I mean, I'm changing directions here.
That's fine.
Back away from internal sense, but we observe and learn.
Mm-hmm.
Purportedly, supposedly, presumably, that there's a cause and effect to things we do and say and some of our actions. Okay, so we observe what appears to be cause and effect relationship to our actions. Therefore, we have a sense that there's that we have that free will. If there's a cause and effect, okay.
If there's an effect from me being the cause.
We believe now. We believe that we made a choice.
But that belief does not make it so.
You're right.
So
here's where I'm going to go back to this. And this is unlike me because it's not my view generally is when there's an unknown question, an important question, I want to know the answer.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to free will and determinism, my view is similar to Pascal's wager with God. My view is if I don't believe I have some amount of free will, then I have to ask myself the question, why bother doing anything or getting out of bed? And so I'm going to choose.
Well,
I believe I'm choosing that I have free will.
So this is Albert Camus, Nietzsche, existentialism 101.
Is it?
Yes, this is the famous Albert Camus quote. Mention of suicide, trigger warning. Do I make a cup of coffee or kill myself?
Right.
But that's it, right? It's like if I have free will, or if I don't have free will, then what the hell is the point? So do I go on living about my life like normal, knowing that? Or should I just kill myself?
No, you should. So for me, it feels good to believe I'm making choices that make a positive difference.
See, I agree.
It feels good to make a wisecrack that makes somebody laugh.
It would feel even better if I had a logical answer. So how do we prove that? Because there is some, or is that just a flaw in my own logical quandaries that I want an answer to what is C? How do I prove that I am?
I think if humankind didn't pursue these deep questions, life would be a lot less rich. But I also believe at some point, we have to choose. We have to focus our attention on what's a little more proximate, what can make an impact in our opinion. And I believe making somebody laugh is a choice that I make. And if I crack a funny joke or what have you, and there's cost to that. I look like a moron most of the time, but every once in a while somebody laughs.
Or you look like a moron and someone laughs.
If at the end of the day it turns out that it's all been determined, I think I'm okay with that because at that time, will it matter? When I discover that it was all determinism, will it matter at that point?
I could make the argument that is when it matters the most.
Is when I discover it?
Yes.
You're assuming that I would discover this and then still have some life left to live. I'm assuming I won't discover it until all other options are gonzo.
Wait, so I'm saying that when you would discover the answer to a question like that, I think it would be after all earthly experience has come to a close.
Okay.
But I do think that, this comes from my own personal belief system, but I do believe that there is a period of time that we will be here on this earth, and that there's a period of time after, some sort of afterlife that's not a traditional afterlife, but wherein
What's a traditional afterlife? I don't know what that means.
I suppose that's fair. Traditional in the Judeo-Christian sense.
Okay.
But where we join back with like cosmic goodness, ultimate consciousness, whatever, wherein we would be more likely to understand that question.
Well, let me ask you this. Before death or after what we consider death, if you found out in 10 minutes, if you found out that we were all determined, what would you do?
Spend my life trying to disprove that.
If you were determined, would you have any say in it?
I suppose not. But then
do whatever determination. If you find out at any point.
But then I would live my life trying to disprove it. Why did we just crack the code on free will? Why would a universe, any sort of being, wants to stay alive, right? Whether it's a conscious...
We have a survival instinct generally, yes.
All beings do, right? So whether
generally.
It's a conscious being that is an ultimate creator that created this universe and us as living beings, as deterministic creatures, or just you don't believe in an ultimate creator and you believe in the universe, but the universe is a being that wants to stay alive, wants to stay in motion, right? So either of those things,
okay,
all of those things would have a survival instinct. Why would one of those, anything that sets out determinism, determine one of those creatures to disprove itself if it wants to survive? So if I spend my entire life trying to disprove determinism, I then disprove determinism.
Well, if you
believe in my proposition that I just set forth.
Unless this cosmic universal consciousness is having you do that deterministically, knowing you'll fail, to convince all the rest of us that we have free will.
But if it was... But if it was having me do that deterministically to convince all of y'all, what if I did fail and I didn't convince anyone? But I still lived trying to disprove determinism.
But you're saying these what ifs. If it's determined, it doesn't matter, right?
I don't know. I just want to have free will.
You do.
But that's the thing is, I believe I do.
And there's no reason to explore the alternative because it's an endless loop. It's either an infinite loop or once you discover it doesn't matter.
That is why I tend to fall into the existentialist camp of everything is meaningless, right? If you follow all of these thoughts down, you eventually get to, well, then everything means nothing. So nothing means everything. You embrace your own meaning. You create meaning for your life. I do tend to fall into that camp, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, I'm not sure I followed all that. That was pretty heady for me.
That's okay. But that's essentially what you said earlier.
I hear your conclusion.
Right? And so I'm like, yes, that is how I choose to live my life on a daily basis. But when I stop and have these conversations, I'm also like, okay, but...
Man, there's so many things I'd love to know. I'd love to speak to God and have a conversation.
Okay, so last question before I wrap us up.
Okay.
You would love to speak to God and have a conversation. Who or what would you be speaking to in that conversation?
I don't know. So I'm... are you asking me what my religious/spiritual kind of...
Yeah.
My current belief system, I believe it's really hard. Boy, this isn't one last question.
One last conversation.
I think some kind of, and it depends on what you call divine, but some kind of divine creation seems to be inevitable in a basic sense. If you get something from nothing? If you cannot get something from nothing,
then something
and the universe
has to be
is something
omnipresent.
Something has to be eternal, not necessarily
eternal. Yes, that's the right word.
Something must be eternal.
And what is
that?
Is that
a divine creator? I don't know. It could be.
See,
I mean, you could have this eternal.
Sorry, I asked you a question, and now I'm stepping all over your answer.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure. But just to try to simplify this, my current belief is there's a probability that of some sort of creation out there. But I'm more of a believer in
And when you say there's a probability of some sort of creation, you mean there's a high probability that there was a creator. Whatever that
a
was.
cause to creation. Yeah, whatever you call it.
If we're in effect, there's an unmoved mover.
There's a
right?
probability. But that said, my strongest sense and feeling is of a somewhat like a universal consciousness, of which each of us is an individual consciousness as well as a part of this universal consciousness. And that's kind of where I stand today.
Yeah. You know what Jorge Luis Borges says? That we are all fingertips of God's consciousness. And I kind of like that.
I'm worried about which finger I am.
Be the middle finger.
And where that finger's been.
Yeah. Gross.
The proctologist.
It's been right up his nose. I'm sorry. I'm so much ruder to you than all of my other guests because you're my dad and I can be ruder to
nice.
you. So I tend to agree with you that if everything that is has to come from something, like energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? Then there has to be something that exists before and after and beyond for eternity.
Okay.
So, agree.
I mean,
here's
I
my
feel
other,
that way, yeah.
No, I do too.
I have no evidence.
I think the interesting thing with that, though, is that I think it proves... I mean, I would define that as God, but I don't know if everyone would define that as God. I think some people would say that that is like an atheistic definition of God, to say that it's just an energy that has existed forever, like or a scientist's definition of the universe, right? So I guess that's my last question before we go into wrap up is, do you think that with that belief system, there is some sort of way to reconcile atheists with theists, in the sense that if we all believe in the science, shouldn't there be a way for us to all reconcile using different language to talk about the same thing?
I think so. I think I understand what you're saying. Are you saying, you know, fundamentally, what is the difference between religion and spirituality?
Not necessarily. No, because I have a different thought about that.
I do think that to say divine creator or creator, I think there's some people who are going to be staunch in their faith, whether their faith is atheism or whether their faith is monotheism or any other theisms. I think there are people who will choose, or who are staunch enough in their belief in their faith that no, you will not reconcile that. However, I believe if we all look at what's right in front of us and what's around us, that yes, we can reconcile the fact that we don't have indisputable proof of either.
Yeah.
And we can reconcile that, and we could be patient and accepting, and we can have our beliefs. But at the end of the day, if we choose to believe something without a rational level of certainty, then the prudent of us would also believe there's a probability or a chance that we could be mistaken.
Yeah. So, do you think that there is an underlying truth that exists? Is there a capital T truth?
I think there are some truths, yes.
Is there truth.
When you say a capital T truth, is there a truth? Yeah, there is a truth. Yes. I mean, it depends on how you define that. When you say, is there a truth, give me an example when there isn't.
So not that, like, the sky is blue. That's not the kind of truth I'm talking about. I mean,
that. You're saying a creator or not.
Is there an ultimate truth?
The Big Bang might be the truth.
Right.
God might be the truth.
So is there
little
one
guy
that...
behind a curtain might be the truth. But one of those, whether we know, whether we're aware, whether we have a theory for it or not, or a faith for it or not, there is truth because
you do
we're
think
here.
that there's something that is an ultimate reality?
Yes.
Okay.
We're not all in a dream.
Cool.
Yes.
Cool. Do you believe the ghosts?
And wait, let me back that up.
Oh, okay.
Even if we are all in a dream, that could be the truth.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Do you believe in ghosts?
By definition, no.
Okay.
Nope.
Do you believe in angels or demons?
In the kind of religious sense, or in the that person is really, really bad and I'm going to call them a demon?
Not, well, however you want to define it.
In a religious sense, do I think there's angels and demons in another dimension? No.
But you think there are people that are really good people and people that are
definitely
really bad
think there
people.
are angelic people and demonic people, yes.
But you wouldn't say that they're non-tangible beings.
Correct.
Okay.
Not in a different dimension, but some human beings possess enough qualities of angels and or demons
Okay.
to warrant that definition. Yes.
Do you believe in aliens?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I think there is a correct answer to this question, by the way.
I would be. I'm a lot closer to believing in an alien than the angel demon discussion.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Now, second to last question.
Okay.
Is there anything we missed that you want to talk about? You had mentioned that there was something else you wanted to go back to about the school thing, so we can definitely touch on that. But also anything else in light of our conversation, in light of the things we talked about, in light of the things you said that you want to throw out there, that you want to clarify, that we didn't touch on at all, but you think it's important to have while the mic is hot.
Yes. So I mentioned that I think, any kind of comparative story of success or failure has the four components that we discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And I do. But what I want to make sure is to let you know, and I think you know this, but to make sure it's
Me
clear,
personally?
you and everyone, you know this, that I am very, very grateful for a couple of people in my life who I could have gone down. To put it bluntly, I was pretty much a screw-up for a lot of years. And there were two people that came into my life that made a huge difference for the better in many, many, many ways. Rob being one, and I only mentioned his name first because I met him first. But then there was another person while I was in college, bartending, and along comes a girl. And all I can say is, just like butter on corn, everything changed.
Only you could take something so sweet about mom and turn it into a joke about TikTok.
Seriously,
you have a very
though,
unique
your mother has been a tremendous impact on my life, and I'm grateful for her.
Me too.
So I didn't want to go through this conversation without saying that.
That's really
publicly.
sweet, Dad. Anything else?
No, I feel great.
That's really lovely and wonderful. Last thing, you know the drill. One word that describes how you're feeling right now. And you know that people say silly words, and it doesn't have to be some profound, beautiful word. It's just an exercise to tie a bow on the conversation. Don't put pressure on it. You know what you're doing? You're putting pressure on the exercise, and the exercise doesn't deserve that.
Yes, dear. I'm feeling honored. I'm honored.
Why?
I see where you're going. I see what you're doing for the world. And to be even a tiny part of it and to know you is a tremendous honor. And I'm proud, all the dad stuff. But truly, no, seriously, I'm honored. Like I said, every success has a lot of randomness. We're all dealt a hand. Some of us, like you said, DNA, you throw that into the luck category. Some of us get a good hand when we're born. Smarts, good looks. We're tall and handsome and all that good stuff. Some of us, draw, 5 cards of crap. And it's not, so we need to focus not on the hand that we draw, but how we play our hand.
Yeah.
And your hand, you got a pretty stout hand, I believe.
I got just about the best hand anybody could get.
But I got to tell you, that really is neither here nor there. What makes me honored and proud to know you and to hang out with you is how you play your hand and how hard you work.
Thank you, Dad. And you are not a small part of that. You are quite a large part of that. So, thank you. I love you. Thank you all so much for listening today. Big thank you to Podington Bear for making Meaning's theme music. If you want more info about today's episode, head to thecoherecollective.com and click on blog. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you can subscribe to our newsletter on thecoherecollective.com so you never miss any updates. For information about all of our stuff, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok at The Cohere Collective, and you can follow me on Instagram at Lillian Reese Brown. If you feel so inclined, please leave an honest review or rating. This really helps me hone in on the audience that is going to resonate with my content and hopefully reach my goal of making the world a better place. Sharing the pod is also a great way to start conversations with important people in your life. Right now, I am feeling blessed. I feel silly saying that word because it's been connoted in a bunch of different ways recently, but reflecting on my life, I really have so much to be grateful for, and listening to the conversation that I was able to have with my dad, and I kind of struck the dad lottery, didn't I? So big thank you to my father for taking the time to have this conversation with me, to have other conversations with me that aren't on a microphone, and for being such a great dad. And of course, a big thank you to you all for being here. I hope you feel like you are living more coherently. I'll catch y'all next time. Love.